Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. We've got a much smaller project this week. This week we're going to be tackling the issue of my Sash clamp storage. Let's get building. So when I first built this unit in the Garage Workshop to put all my storage in, I put these sash clamps on the wall, and it was before I built my clamp unit, and I'll put a little link to this video, which is still working absolutely brilliantly. In fact, I'm going to go on and board the outside of this because I think I've got a lot more space here than I can use, but that's another video. So when I put this up, it was only a very temporary measure, and as you can see, or may be able to see, it's sagged in the middle. I don't actually think the clamp I attached was just a really basic construction, but I don't think it's strong enough and the wood is not thick enough to support the weight of the sash clamps. I've got 6 of these sash clamps in 3 different sizes, and each one is quite substantial in weight. I mean, it doesn't weigh a ton, don't get me wrong, but they're too heavy, I think, for the structure that I've got on the wall. And even though it's not going anywhere, as you can see, it's really not very good. And the other thing is, I don't like the way it looks. I think it looks horrible. It's of some really old wood that I had lying around, some 12mm plywood. So what I'm going to do is look through. I've actually got some of the wood that I used for this build left, just a few little pieces. So I'm going to go through the wood and I'm going to build a clamping system that's a bit better. And the other thing is, it's far too high. When I put this on the wall originally, I'd originally planned to put stuff underneath it, which I sort of never got round to. So apart from moving it, I'm also going to lower it down to make it a lot more accessible for me to use. And also potentially, so I've got an opportunity to rearrange some of the things I've got above it. Because this section of the Garage Workshop, I'm not going to lie, it isn't the prettiest. So I'm going to get the clamps off the wall, get looking for the wood, and let's start making it. So of course the first thing I actually had to do was disassemble the current clamp storage, which luckily didn't take very long. And actually when I removed this bit, I had a little bit of trouble with the last screw. It was so embedded, and I must have over tightened it when I put it on because I could not get that screw out at all. I tried a screwdriver, I tried a little bit of gentle persuasion, I tried a normal handheld screwdriver, and in the end I just literally went for the brute force approach, which did leave me with a little bit of a mark, but not too much. So the next thing I did was offer up the side. I decided to leave a gap on the left hand side, which I talk about at the end, and mark it on. And actually this was where I started, unbeknown to me, I started to make my mistakes. Quite an easy mistake to make, I think. I just got a bit confused with one of the lines that I'd put on. So you can see there that I've marked the line, which is where my hand is. And when I actually went to attach it, I attached it to the right of the line instead of the left. This is just a little spacer that I made to put sort of between the pairs of holders on the clamp, just to keep it the same width apart. It was 4 centimeters wide, and I just used this. I just rested it in between to make sure that they were okay. I then set up a stop block and I started cutting down the bits of plywood to the width. It was about 20 centimeters, just over, and that would allow me enough space, or the clamps to be enough to support the weight on an angle. So when I had them all laid out, I took the 2 sort of slightly bigger ones, they're only a little bit wider, and I marked them on the diagonal because obviously they were going to be the sort of triangular. I think this shape is much firmer and much more secure. So I took my time, did 2 quality lines, set up a stop block for the first one, which actually worked really well. It doesn't look it from there, but I was super careful there because my fingers are actually quite close. When I came to set up the second one, which I thought was going to work in exactly the same way, of course, being the Garage Workshop, it didn't. So in the end I sort of had to freehand it. And again, just be very careful if you're doing something like this yourself. You really need to know your saw, and although it looks quite close, that's a bit of a depth of field. My fingers were quite a long way off. I then offered it up with the inset, and I just marked it to give me an accurate place to drill my 3 holes. I deliberately went for 3 holes and 3 very long screws just to sort of really help maintain the strength. Then I decided I didn't need those end bits. I didn't want them jutting out too far, so I just nibbled off the edge on all of them. I then went back and drilled in the screws. Now at this point, I'd forgotten that I was going to get some tear out, so I got my drill block. Luckily I remembered in enough time that I didn't get any tear out on the back of the piece of wood. And I then offered up the square, put some type blonde glue on it, used my trademark glue spreader, and stuck it on. And as you can see, you might just be able to see that pencil line there, and this is where I went wrong. Rather than putting it to the left side, I put it too far to the right. The next thing to do was to put the screws in. As I was about to do that, when I thought, well, actually that screw might be a bit too long, so I changed it out for a smaller one. And when they were all attached, it was absolutely rock solid. It was definitely not going anywhere. I'd sort of over tighten the screws rather than you know, sort of drilling. I just tightened the screws up to take them below the surface. I then lined up the second one. Obviously I'd inserted the clamp here to give me an idea of exactly where it was going to sit. I wanted it to be quite tight, and there again, had I stuck it there, it would have been absolutely fantastic. But as you'll see in a minute, I didn't. I stuck it on the right hand side of that line, and I should have stuck it on the left. But mistakes happen, don't they? And actually in the end it didn't affect anything because it fitted really nicely. So after having done that, I just continued with the same process of gluing and then waiting for it to dry enough that I could literally turn it over and then screw them in from the back. Again, same thing, just drilling and screwing all the way through. Same process, except for the last two. I'd cut smaller ones here because obviously they will be dealing with the smaller clamps, and I wasn't too worried about these in the same way that I would be for the bigger clamps, because they are quite a lot lighter. So I used two smaller sort of triangle offcuts to get it. Again, same thing, and then I offered them up, and luckily they fitted really, really nicely, as you'll see in a minute. Nice fit there. And then I used a really dodgy camera angle, apologies, just to get it on the wall at the right sort of height. I wasn't too worried about it being square, because obviously I squared it up when I screwed it into the wall with a level. And I made the conscious decision to butt it up against the other clamp storage, just to give me a bit more space on the right hand side, because as I said earlier, I'm going to sort of redo all of that. I just drove in, these are just self-tapping screws, nice and straightforward, and then when it was fixed I popped in the clamps, and I was really happy with how it turned out. Okay, so here it is, my finished clamp storage, and overall I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. I did make what I thought was a mistake. I inset the holders of the clamps on this side about 18mm, and as I went through I fixed this one. As you can see, it's a little bit wider than the others, because what I did was I actually stuck this on the outside of the line that I'd ruled instead of the inside. But with the way that it's butted up against my other clamp unit, it's actually worked out really well, and it's allowed me to put the fixings in, which I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So what I actually thought was a mistake has turned out quite well. Now on this side, it is butted up against the side, but again, where it is, I don't think you're going to see that too much. I set out to make something that was rock solid, not something that looked pretty. There's a couple of burn marks on the plywood there, but to be honest, I can cope with that. But the actual thing is rock solid. So I achieved my goal of getting something solid to put those clamps on, because they weigh a lot, these Sash clamps. They're very, very heavy. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. If you are a new subscriber, a new viewer, please can I ask you to subscribe, like and comment. It does make a huge amount of difference to me. I'm trying to grow the channel to 1,000 and beyond, and it really, really would help if you subscribe. If you are a regular viewer, thank you so much. Keep leaving the comments. I do read them all, I respond to them all, and I really do take your feedback on board. Hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care, fellow woodworkers.